Everton have been docked 10 points, with potential lawsuits of up to £300 million from relegated clubs and clubs around them to follow, the likes of Nottingham Forest, Burnley, Leeds United and Leicester City. Whether you think it's too harsh or not, it does paint a picture about the current state of affairs over on the blue half of Merseyside. So, here's how Everton's downfall has truly taken place.
When Farhad Moshiri strode into Goodison Park in 2016, he did so with one key ambition: to transform Everton's fortunes. Announced as the Toffees' new investor at 4:46 on Saturday, February the 27th, the British-Iranian billionaire walked into a club that had gone 21 years without silverware and sat 12th in the Premier League table. For a club more used to qualifying for Europe, even finishing in the top 4 under David Moyes, that was a disappointment. Moshiri wasted little time in attempting to reawaken the perennial sleeping giants, pledging to give everything I have to re-establish the 9-time English champions back amongst the elite. He told fans, "We don't want to be a museum. We need to be competitive and win." Over the course of the next 7.5 years, Moshiri did transform Everton's fortunes, but not in the way he envisaged. In each of the past 2 seasons, a 12th place finish would have been blessed relief. Instead, the Toffees became relegation candidates, jeopardising a top-flight status that will soon extend to 70 years. All that while facing financial fair play charges and the substantial costs of a new stadium, with Sky Sports pundit Jamie Carragher labelling them as the worst-run club in the country. Last month, Moshiri confirmed he'd finally agreed to sell Everton, but fan worries remain amid concerns about the club's potential new owners. How did things go so wrong? This is how Everton were taken to the brink of despair. Moshiri's premiership in the blue half of Merseyside developed at breakneck speed in early 2018. Just 24 hours before buying Everton, he sold his 15% stake in Arsenal to long-term business partner Alisher Usmanov, as the pair's battle with Stan Kroenke for control of the Gunners continued to go nowhere fast. Boasting an estimated personal wealth of £1.3 billion, the Moshiri buy-in resulted in Everton fans chanting, "We're f***ing rich," within days. They believed they'd finally found their ticket back to the elite after an 11th place finish in 2014-15 and left many worried they were slipping too far behind. "I was cautiously optimistic, like most fan bases who come into new money," says John Blaine, vice chairman of the Everton Shareholders Association. "We could see he didn't have the buying power of a Sheikh Mansour or Roman Abramovich, but, Bill Kenwright used to say, this is no longer a game for millionaires, it's a game for billionaires." Actions do speak louder than words though. It's great to spend money, but even in your day-to-day life, spending it badly is potentially worse than not spending it at all. Moshiri spared no expense on early statement appointments. Roberto Martinez was sacked as Everton finished 11th again in 2015-16, replaced by Ronald Koeman from Southampton for a reported £6 million per year. Steve Walsh, who was key in Leicester's improbable Premier League title triumph, became the club's first financial director of football that summer. The new owner made further waves in his adoptive city by co-purchasing the iconic Royal Liver building, which later housed the club's administrative offices. A willingness to court the media was firmly at odds with the often stuffy nature of his inherited hierarchy. After Everton's climb to 7th in 2016-17, earning a return to Europa League football, the next step in the Chartered Accountant's master plan was to win the 2017 summer transfer window in a concerted attempt to progress the Toffees even further. Amid the giddiness and vanity signings, in came Gylfi Sigurdsson in a £45 million deal, Jordan Pickford and Michael Keane, who were £30 million each, David Klaassen for £26.3 million, Nikola Vlasic for £9 million, plus the return of Wayne Rooney on a free transfer. There was an absence of coherent strategy in the £125 million total splurge. Rooney, Sigurdsson, Klaassen and Vlasic each played similar roles, largely operating off of a striker, while the club found itself bereft of the proven marksman needed to fill the void left by Romelu Lukaku's Manchester United exit. Koeman later claimed he'd lined up Olivier Giroud to replace Everton's record Premier League goalscorer, and even had the Arsenal man in the building before the French dreamboat's late change of heart. Ronald was fighting with the club until the last day of the transfer window. Jan Kloitenberg, Everton's then fitness coach, tells 442, "If you sell your biggest striker and there's nobody else to come in, you know it will be a big problem. Everybody was working to get a new striker in who could score a lot of goals. That was a big loss for the club." Desperate times forced the Dutchman to swallow his pride and reintegrate Oumar Niasse in the hope of salvaging his flatlining tenure. Having banished the Senegalese striker to the under-23s a year earlier, it wasn't enough. After winning just 2 of his opening 9 league fixtures, and the Toffees in the bottom 3, Koeman was dismissed. Caretaker David Unsworth, part of the side that won Everton's last trophy, the 1995 FA Cup, fared little better as his temporary charges crashed out of the Europa League group stage with barely a whimper, losing 3-0 in Lyon and 5-1 at home to Atalanta. During a 5-week search for Koeman's successor, Moshiri sought the counsel of esteemed figures within Goodison's employ, including Joe Royle, the manager for the FA Cup triumph, who'd since rejoined the club as professional development coordinator. I only spoke to him a couple of times. One of the last times was after Atalanta battered us, Royle tells FourFourTwo. I never told him they were blaming managers. David Unsworth was in charge, and I said, it's nothing to do with that. The players aren't good enough, Mr. Moshiri. It was all very amiable, but that was probably the last time I ever spoke to him. Sam Allardyce's eventual coronation instigated another theme of madness over method, with no consistent style of play among the club's managerial choices. For the start of 2018-19, Marco Silva replaced the one-time England boss's pragmatism, but the Portuguese lasted just 18 months. In December 2019, Moshiri finally struck upon a coach whose pedigree and reputation perfectly aligned with his vision, Mr. Carlo Ancelotti. On the rebound from a 19-month spell with Napoli, when Everton became early Premier League leaders in the 2020-21 season, inspired by new signings James Rodriguez, the good times finally appeared set to roll. As it turned out, Ancelotti's decision to rejoin Real Madrid, just a week after the Toffees had botched a season-long bid for European football, coincided with an abrupt end to any sort of fan-base optimism. The hiring of former Liverpool boss Rafa Benitez was unsurprisingly unpopular. Just as years of reckless spending came home to roost, despite cost-cutting measures to satisfy the Premier League's profit and sustainability regulations, Demarai Gray's £1.7 million arrival constituted their sole cash signing that summer. The club still failed to balance its books, having already lost nearly £400 million over the previous 4 seasons. The Toffees later announced a deficit of £44.7 million for 2021-2022, which culminated with the club narrowly avoiding relegation under Frank Lampard. Benitez had been sacked in mid-January, mere days after being allowed to sign Vitaly Mykolenko and Nathan Patterson for a combined £33 million. That summer heralded a return of the sell-to-buy model that had been commonplace under Ken Wright's administration. Amadou Onana, Dwight McNeil, Neil Maupay and James Garner were amongst those signed after Richarlison's £60 million sale to Tottenham Hotspur. The club fared no better on the pitch. Lampard was the latest January sacking, this time during a window frustratingly devoid of new arrivals. Only Abdoulaye Doucouré's final day goal against Bournemouth prevented relegation to the Championship under new boss Sean Dyche.
Off-field issues have not gone away though, with Everton having now been summoned before an independent commission over an FFP breach, for which they have now been docked 10 points with potential further ramifications to follow.
All this has come during the construction of Everton's new stadium at Bramley-Moore Dock. As Goodison Park began to look more and more of an anachronism, Moshiri agreed a deal to purchase the disused waterfront site just a year into his tenure, but its scope for redevelopment was stymied by adjoining rows of Victorian-era terraced housing. Bramley-Moore not only represented a long-term solution to the grand old lady, but also a shot at redemption for Everton. According to Moshiri, costs for the stadium total a whopping £760 million. There had been suggestions that this could be Everton's last full season at Goodison, ahead of a possible mid-season move in 2024-25, but the club has since said that relocation could potentially take place in the summer of 2025. Construction was also tinged by tragedy in mid-August after Michael Jones, a 26-year-old ventilation engineer and match-going Evertonian, was killed in an on-site accident. COVID and Russia's invasion of Ukraine have been contributing factors to the Toffees' financial situation, and last March they severed ties with USM Holdings, the umbrella company for Alisher Usmanov's stable of Russian brands, which was heavily intertwined with the club's commercial operations. That link-up included an extensive sponsorship deal for their Finch Farm training ground and also incorporated a lucrative option to match any naming right bids for their new stadium. The horrible things going on in Ukraine probably kiboshed any chance that Usmanov will come out of the shadows and be proactively involved in the football club, says Everton Shareholders Association's blame. Stability has not been much better on the football front. Since Moshiri's February 2016 arrival, the club have had just 3 campaigns without a mid-season change of manager. When Koeman got his marching orders in October 2017, it was chairman Ken Wright who was tasked with delivering the news after a 5-2 home loss to Arsenal. Moshiri had been present at the game during one of his semi-regular appearances at Goodison, visits which ended in 2021. I was outside with assistant manager Erwin Koeman and the squad members who didn't play in that game, remembers Cluttenberg. We came in and saw the chairman. Erwin said, "I think there'll be a special message coming for us." I thought, well, of course. It's not a good start to the season, but maybe he's coming to give Ronald an extra hug and say that for now, we'll continue. But he was only 2 minutes in his office. That was a big disappointment, especially for Ronald, because he put a lot of energy and effort into the club. They realised at the start of the season was not going well, and I understand that. But it was more of an emotional thing, because of the fans' reaction. Supporter discourse has not always dictated the pace of Everton's managerial changes. Benitez was afforded a stay of execution that led to Director of Football Michael Brand's resignation, while Silva and Lampard's exits were prolonged to the point that the latter's squad learned of his downfall via the media. During a 5-hour wait for official confirmation, the former Chelsea and England midfielder was disposed at a time when relations between the boardroom and terraces had plunged to fresh depths. After Ken Wright, Chief Executive Denise Barrett-Baxendale, Chief Finance and Strategy Officer Grant Ingles and Non-Executive Director Graham Sharp, the club's 2-time title-winning striker, were advised not to attend January's defeat to relegation rival Southampton out of concern for real and credible threats to their safety. One of the more serious claims alleged that Barrett-Baxendale had been put in a headlock by a man while leaving the director's box after a fixture at Goodison in January. In the immediate aftermath of the incident, police insisted that they had no reports of threats or incidents, prompting further criticism of the board from some supporters. Headlockgate became a tipping point for disenfranchised fans to follow. "The club did our job for us," says Chris Hannon, from the NSNOW campaign group, their name being a tweak on the acronym of the club's Latin motto, Nil Satis Nisi Optimum, which means nothing but the best is good enough. They basically turned the majority of people who attended the next march against them, Hannon adds. "We must have had 5,000 or 6,000 outside before the game against Arsenal. The hardest thing about the protest was getting people out of a routine. We tried to create one, meeting in the Royal Oak pub, having a drink, then doing the march. It worked really well." Fan activism continued to play a part when Everton narrowly preserved their Premier League status thanks to Doucouré's goal against Bournemouth. Visceral chants of "sack the board" reverberated around Goodison in the final whistle's immediate aftermath, and were heeded weeks later when 3 of the 4 directors who'd been advised to stay away opted to leave their posts for good. That announcement was accompanied by a statement confirming that the future of Ken Wright would be communicated in the next 48 hours. Some 11 days later, Moshiri's confirmation that he decided to retain the chairman on an interim board for an important period of transition did not go down all that well with a large section of the fan base. Bill is pretty smart, but he also thinks like the fans, says Cluttenberg, believing that actually, when Koeman was fired, a knee-jerk decision was taken to quell angry supporters immediately after a heavy loss, rather than patience and calm being shown. Moshiri, I've never met him personally, he continues, so it's a little bit difficult to talk about somebody I never met. He was the owner, but sometimes it's also a bit of a problem if you don't really have the knowledge of football. Avoiding relegation last term did at least stave off even more potential problems. September's announcement that Moshiri had agreed to sell his entire 94.1% controlling stake to American investment fund 777 Partners, who have already stumped up a £20 million loan to help short-term working capital, carries the potential to bring an end to that financial deadlock, while also signalling the long-awaited break with what has become a truly dysfunctional ownership. If approved by regulatory bodies, a decision is expected by early December. The Miami-based operators of a global multi-club network will ascend to power by the end of 2023. But it could just as easily be an archetypal case of jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire. For now, fans remain concerned amid ongoing scrutiny of their potential new custodians, who face dissent from fans at other clubs in their portfolio, including Hertha Berlin, Standard Liège, and Red Star in Paris. "I think we're all scared by the last 2 owners," admits Hannon. "Everyone's got a bit of insecurity about what's going to happen, because it's a minefield. We'll find out by Christmas what type of owners they're going to be. If you were buying a football club, you couldn't ask for a better first 12 months to make a difference. Just by saying the right things, bringing the right people in and delivering on the new stadium." I still don't think that this is the end of Moshiri at Everton though. No way. Hannon's scepticism that this will be the 68-year-old's last ride reflects the sheer unpredictability that came normalised under his watch. When it finally happens, hardly any Evertonians will mourn Moshiri's departure. The man they once believed would be the answer to all their prayers turned out to be their worst nightmare.